And Olivier wanted to hear what my father had to say. And finally my father said, Larry, why do you want me to do this? And Larry said, well, it's because you're the greatest intuitive actor alive today. I thought, wow, man, I was glad I was a fly on that wall.
Hi, I'm Rob Word. Welcome to A Word on Westerns. Today we have a special treat for you because it's Father's Day. And you know what that means? It's a special treat for me too. What I've put together is a series of short interview clips from some of our guests. And you know, we've been very lucky with our guests, the actors and actresses who have joined us, because many of them have had celebrity fathers. And so as a tribute to them and all of you dads out there, I've put together this little montage that has highlights from some of these conversations. I think you'll like it. If you do, let us know. Leave us a comment. Check out our Patreon page, and happy Father's Day. As a child star getting cast in that great series, do you remember any of that? Because you must have been 1 year old.
No, actually I was 5.
Okay.
I had already been working for 4.5 years, so
wow.
I was a veteran then.
What kind of parents did you have?
Actors, and you know, when I grew up in my family, there were just actors all over. You mentioned Charlton Heston, he was my godfather. Jane Russell's my sister's godmother. Tyrone Power and Errol Flynn, and my dad were like the three amigos.
That must have been something.
Yeah, well, Tyrone Power even named my sister Taryn after his daughter Darren, and you know, and they all ended up dying within the same year of each other too.
And young.
Yes, yeah, it was interesting.
Fest was a wonderful man.
Absolutely. Because
you spent so much time with him growing up, and you had lost your father. Was he sort of a father figure for you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, it was great. Ed Ames, I mean, there were lots of wonderful people, and that's really why my mom kept me in the business. She got me into it because of a joke. My two sisters, older sisters, had started working when they were like 2, 3, doing commercials and stuff, or a little older. And they used to ask my dad when I was born, well, you know, how about your son? Is he going to be in the business? Oh, the kid's a bum. He's a month old, hasn't earned a dime. You know, 2 months old, hasn't, and he loved that joke. My mom hated that joke. So she went and got me on a Playhouse 90 in Jane Mansfield's arms. I think it's why I still love acting today. You start in Jane Mansfield's arms, you keep on to go for it. And she didn't tell him, made him watch it, and he sat there and watched it and just turned to her. Marilyn, you sure know how to ruin a good joke. But then once he died, that's one of the main reasons she kept me in the business, is because she thought it'd be very good to have a lot of male influence around me, and good way to grow up.
We're going to talk to Dawn about growing up with the Lone Ranger. Now, when did you realize that your dad was a superstar for all of us kids?
Do you all remember, or maybe some of you remember, the department store, the Broadway? Yeah. We were shopping for television. I think, I don't know, 8 years old or something. And someone recognized his voice. The salesperson said, I recognize that voice. Are you the Lone Ranger? And I just stood there and said, what's happening here? I didn't have a perception of that because, you know, Dad was in costume. So we were able to go about our business and live our lives and traverse the world free of anyone recognizing him. So that was a little odd for me, but I think I got over it.
After that happened, then were you more aware of it in your universe with your friends at school?
I was teased. You know how kids are.
Like how? How were you teased?
Oh, you're the daughter of the Lone Ranger. Ew.
Yeah.
That's
no,
bad.
It was not, yeah, it was not, no, it wasn't fun. That was not a fun thing. You know, because don't forget, this was I was born in 1958, so the television show and the 2 feature films had already been filmed and off the air and so on and so forth. So growing up, though, in the 60s, it was a little, it was already, maybe it's on reruns, but it wasn't fresh and current. So, and by the 70s, no one was interested in that at all. I mean, we were not interested in being patriotic during the 70s. So his character in that persona was kind of shunned.
4-Star Productions, which was Dick Powell, your father.
Right.
And it was probably a wonderful learning experience for you.
Extremely so, and it was. I'd graduated from college and came out, not having the only job offer I had was to manage a theater in New York, and I was married with a kid. So my dad said, "Listen, as the son of a DGA member, I can get you into the Directors Guild." Nepotism was in flower in those days. And I didn't know what end of the camera you pointed actors, And I go to work at Review, actually at Studio Center, Republic in those days. And they put me to work, and I worked for them for a year. I never had a day preparation. And there was no second. I'm doing Wagon Train and shows like that. And you're running your ass off is what's happening on a show like that. So anyway, after a year, my dad offered me a job at 4-Star, so I left. Paul Donnelly, who was the head of production, said, "I'm going to send your dad a bill for $10,000 for training you." He never said it. But anyway. So,
how'd that make you feel?
Well, it was true.
You hadn't acted before. How did you get that part?
I knocked my tooth out is basically what happened. And my father had to take me to the dentist, and we had just moved out from New York, and we rented a house out in Topanga, Malibu area there, and he had to take me to the dentist in Culver City, and he was like, "I'm not going to drive all the way back out to the beach. I'm just going to take him to the studio with me." And so we went to Paramount, and I was like, this is great, because I'm the youngest of 4 boys, and I've got alone time with my dad, who's always busy. And so I was sitting with him in his office as he was feverishly typing the final draft of the script, the shooting draft. He had to have the shooting draft ready. And pecking away as electric typewriter, and I remember I was just talking to him, and he finally stopped me, and he said, "John, I can't talk now. I just have to get this done. Go outside. The Bonanza Street," as he called it at Paramount, "the Bonanza Street is empty. Just go. Wander around, play. Don't break any windows. Don't steal anything." I walked down the hallway and going out the 2 big glass doors, and in come Walter Seltzer and Fred Engel, who were the producers. And they stopped me and they said, Are you here with Tommy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Come with us." They took me into their office. And they just started talking to me about all kinds of things, school kid stuff, girls, sports.
How old were you again?
I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me a Coca-Cola, which I wasn't allowed to have. So it was like, I hit the mother load. This is amazing. I'm having a Coke. I'm sitting with these guys. They're talking to me. Somebody wants to take time. And then they figured out that I was indeed my father's son. And I could hear him. Their office was right next to his, and I could hear him pecking away in there. And then they get on the phone and they call him and they say, "Hey, Tommy." And I can hear him through the wall and I can hear him through the phone. And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "We got the kid." And he goes, "Oh, great." And he goes, "Yeah, he's right here." "Oh, I'm coming." And I'm sitting there. The door opens. I'm like, "Hey, you fucking kid." Excuse me. He's like, "What?" He goes, No. He's my son. He's not an actor. He's an idiot." That's exactly. I really want to get a T-shirt made that says, "I'm not an actor. I'm an idiot."
you doubled your dad in The Gray Fox. He and Maggie came over because back years ago with The Gray Fox, he had a rough cut of the movie. It was on 3/4 inch. And I must have been the only guy he knew with a 3/4 inch. And so we had a dinner party, and Dick and Maggie came, and I invited Dobie and Marilyn Carey too. And then we showed the 3/4 inch, and it wasn't scored yet, and it was really long, I remember. Yeah. But at the very end, there's this part, and your dad goes, "This is my son," and you're going down, sliding down a hill or something.
Right, off the rocks, jumping off.
That didn't make it into the movie, which is too bad. But
they said it would have killed him, so they took it out. But I did some horseback riding with him alongside the train. When that stuff, I did some of that for him. And he was such a great horseman, and for him to let me do something like that, he must have thought kind of make him look kind of good, I guess.
Well, he looked good in that part when he's on his horse on the railroad track, and the train comes, and the horse is getting a little skittish.
Yep.
That was like, that's my man, that's Dick, he's hanging in there. What a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for him, and he was so perfect.
He really was. I mean, and the last couple of shows he did do, like the Straight Story, it was perfect for him, so that was good for him.
Yeah. I know he must have been proud of you, and I know you were proud of him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very proud of him.
Devlin Ward, what are you trying to do? Kill us?
Rather have your friend drive?
Yeah!
I have a reel at home doing a little skit at this club I belong to called the Bohemian Club. And so this guy was talking to me about my relationship with my dad. And I said, my dad was really very sensitive, very, very willing to listen to what I had to say and really concerned about, how I was feeling and everything. Well, let me give you an example. And then I roll this reel of film.
Step down off of that carriage, mister.
Basically, all it is cuts of him hitting the shit out of me, knocking me on my ass, and it ends up with him shooting me in the stomach.
If you're my father, if you love me, you'll shoot him.
Well, I'm your father, and I sure love you, so...
Oh, you shot him! You really shot him!
Hey!
He dies!
If he dies, he'll be the first man ever killed with a blank cartridge. We use this to start the races on the 4th.
Big Jake, you played his son in that, and that on-film relationship was hysterical. You got some funny lines in that, and he did too.
Yeah.
Good morning, Daddy.
Daddy?
Daddy.
Daddy. Well, son, since you haven't learned to respect your elders, it's time you learn to respect your betters.
And I don't know how many times I've been hit by him on film, but it's quite a collection anyway.
Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. My God, all these classic people that Dad worked with Roy and with Gene and with Wyatt's grandfather in Sullivan's Travels. In the 1930s, you could go to a movie house and you could see a cartoon, and Bobby Winckler was doing the voice in this Merry Melodies Looney Tunes cartoon. And then they'd have like a specialty, Pete Smith specialty, and Dad would be in that. And then there'd be a serial like Daredevils of the Red Circle or some Republic thing, and Dad was the kid in that. And then he'd be in the Western, and then he'd be in the A Picture. And then when you went home and turned on the radio, he'd be on Edward G. Robinson show on radio, or he'd be on... he'd had multiple jobs in one day.
How long did it go for him as a child star?
Between the ages of like 6 to 20. And then he caught the tail end of World War II and then got involved with that. And then his parents wanted him to go to college and he could pursue the acting afterwards. And he became interested in law. And he became a successful entertainment attorney with his sole proprietor, with representing people he worked with as a kid. Now, like George Montgomery, Dad did a movie with George Montgomery called Last of the Duanes.
Zane Grey.
And then later in life, he represented George Montgomery as an attorney. We used to go to his house for Thanksgiving. I mean, George Montgomery was this big giant, as a kid, I remember shaking his hand. It was like shaking a bear claw, It just was...
The legend of your dad is that he would shoot 50, 60 takes without communicating what it was he was looking for.
Because he said that he didn't want to tell them and have it look phony. He wanted them to kind of find it themselves. And sometimes he just gave up.
And sometimes I don't think he necessarily knew how to express the specific emotional vibe that he wanted, but he just wanted it to be authentic. And he found that authenticity sometimes only came from frustration or anger or exhaustion,
Was he at home like that with you all too?
Yeah. Well, I don't think he had that much patience with us.
Right.
But he expected a lot. That's for sure. But I wouldn't say he worked with us that way.
No, I mean, his attitude towards actors and towards being on a set was that these people are paid, they're paid to be, they're professional. He wanted a professional response. And if they were amateurs, like Audrey Hepburn, or like the kids in the Children's Hour, or Harold Russell, he was very patient. But if they were professionals and they were not doing what he wanted or working with him to get what he wanted, he became brutal.
Mm-hmm.
I was at John Ford's funeral. Now, I owe my dad the love of movies because he didn't make me, but he did. He made me sit down one day and watch a movie called The Searchers. I got a running commentary from my dad of, look how he does this, look how he does that, look at this shot. And subconsciously, my father embedded this love of John Ford's movies. And as I started developing an interest in film history, he would talk about John Ford. And he worked for Ford only twice. My dad helped founded the first motion picture AA group. So that's probably one of the reasons why he didn't work much with Ford. And I say John Ford is absolutely positively the greatest director in American cinema. So when Ford passed away, I went with my dad. When John Ford died, it was like, wow, it really affected me. What was really rough and where I totally lost it is when I saw John Wayne with Ford's widow on one side and his wife Pilar on the other side, and John Wayne is crying. To watch John Wayne cry, it was an amazing day to see that. But John Wayne is, I consider, a gift from the cinematic gods. Even when he was crying, he had that magnetism. And he had something that everybody could relate to. And the best way to describe why is John Wayne still to this day so popular is because I think what you see on the screen is what the man was. And there's a great line from the end of The Tall Men. He's what every boy wants to be and what every old man wishes he had been.
You'd always read these articles. In fact, you're still reading them about he was so underrated. He was such a fine actor. Look at these classic
If everybody
films that
says
he
he's
did.
so underrated, maybe he isn't. I was at my dad's house, and Sir Laurence Olivier came over. He wanted my dad to do Cat on a Hot Tin Roof on a television show that he was producing. And my dad said, "Chris, will you just stick around in 10 bar?" I said, "Sure." The doorbell rings, and I say, "Mr. Olivier?" He said, "Call me Larry." I said, "Well, I'm Chris Mitchum, come on in." And I got him the drinks, and I'm sitting at the bar, and they're sitting on the couch and chair by the coffee table. And it was the first time in my life I ever saw my father want to listen to what the other person had to say. He had so much respect for Olivier. And Olivier wanted to hear what my father had to say. And finally my father said, Larry, why do you want me to do this? And Larry said, well, it's because you're the greatest intuitive actor alive today. I thought, wow, man, I was glad I was a fly on that wall.
Well,
get to hear that.
That's great. When you were growing up, though, did you go on location?
Yeah, if it's summertime, we always went on location. But we'd be like he was shooting a film in Athens, and he got a 52-foot yacht with a 3-man crew, and my brother and I sailed around all the Greek islands for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
So yeah, it wasn't bad. I do remember going to RKO. And I didn't know. I guess I was a little slow as a kid because I didn't realize my father was an actor. I just thought he went to great places and we had a fun time. I go to RKO and I got to play with the little 5-foot miniature battleships that they remote controlled around the pond. This little 2-foot-high King Kong. And I just thought he just worked at a neat place. I had no idea what he was doing there.
Well, he did. He worked at a neat place.
Yeah.
I know a lot of us have questions about growing up with Roy and Dale. They were everybody's ideal mom and dad. Where did you grow up?
All over the San Fernando Valley.
All over the San Fernando
Yes.
Valley.
We moved every couple of years, and little kids think really weird things about their parents and all. So I always figured that we moved every time Dad built all of the cabinets that the garage would hold. Not taking into account that we kept adopting all these kids.
Well, that was a huge family, but you were so blessed to have so many brothers and sisters, too.
Well, and we were our own mini United Nations because I have a sister from Edinburgh, Scotland, and then the youngest of us was Debbie from Korea. So we were from all over. When I did the first book, it was after years of my husband Larry and my mom nagging me. Mom said that I had to write a book since I was the oldest, and that I was the one that remembered Dad making movies rather than just doing TV shows. I wrote the book thinking that I knew everything. And of course, there were several of Mom and Dad's friends and my friends who called me and said, this wasn't quite right and that wasn't quite right and you missed this. And then there were other people when I was off doing Western festivals and all who wanted more information. And then we found out that my one grandmother had left a bunch of stuff in a cedar chest for me, a lot of movie magazines from when I was little. And there was tons of stuff to put in another book. So I've got like 350 plus pictures and lots more information. And
It's a terrific book. Both are good.
Oh,
This is
thank
the
you.
new one. The Cowboy Princess Rides Again.
My father and Gregory Peck were not a match made in heaven. And I think the world of Gregory Peck. I mean, this is one of the finest gentlemen, one of the finest actors and finest people that I've ever met in the business. And I was able to work with him on several other war films like MacArthur and Pork Chop Hill. He was fantastic, but he was not the extrovert that my father was. My father is hooting and hollering and swearing and, and this was not Gregory Peck. And my father was concerned that Gregory Peck was not tough enough to play this character in the film. So my father devised a new scene where Gregory Peck kicks John Russell in the head early in the picture so that from then on you knew you didn't fool with Gregory Peck.
It worked.
It worked. But Gregory Peck had broken his ankle. And if you see that movie, he's running around on those rocks in the Alabama hills, never squawked. Now, he didn't hang out at the bars with the rest of the actors and crew and all that. He kind of stayed by himself. And I think that alienated him a little bit with some of the people. Even Ann Baxter was not real happy that he wasn't, you know, one of the boys. But that just wasn't Gregory Peck. And in the scene where Gregory Peck and Ann Baxter have that fight where they're rolling around in the corral, my father just told her, he says, just beat the shit out of him. And she did. Boy, but he would get up, dust himself off, never a word, never a squawk. He was absolutely fantastic. And by the time the picture was over, my father was a fan. And when I did the documentary on my father, when I interviewed Gregory Peck, he said, you know, I love working for your father. I mean, he was absolutely fantastic. I wish we could have done more films together.
My father was a screenwriter. He wrote a Western, actually. He wrote Return of the Bad Men with Randolph Scott and Robert Ryan. In fact, he got all the bad guys from the Old West and put them in one gang for Randolph to take on.
That was a big hit, too. I think Lawrence Tierney might have been one of those bad guys in that film.
I hope not.
He was a bad guy.
He was a wild man.
Yeah. Did you have favorite Western stars?
Jimmy Stewart and Winchester 73.
Wasn't that a great film?
Yeah.
Anthony Mann.
And of course, my dad's movie. I remember when it opened, he took all the kids in the neighborhood. We climbed in the car and we drove to see it. And Westerns were wonderful. There was no, that's what you wanted to see were Westerns. And my favorite actors were like Whip Wilson and Lash LaRue. Yeah. And I saw Gene Autry. I went to now you go to rock concerts. Well, in those days, you went to see your favorite cowboy actor. He would be on stage, he'd sing a few songs, I remember his horse had guns for their bite,
In the bit.
I thought that was amazing. He'd always reach for one of those if he needs it.
I remember when the Kung Fu movie came on. It was an ABC Tuesday night movie, 73 minutes, and they were doing a different movie every week, but the ratings were so good that they spun it off into a TV series, and it was a smash.
It did well.
Yeah. Well, you actually did an episode of that with your dad.
I did.
How nice.
My dad was captured by the natives, and they tied his eyelids open and stuck him in the ground with him pointing at the sun, so he went blind. And I can't talk. I'm playing a mute.
That's easy. That's not fair.
It wasn't easy. I had to, indicate to David, Fly Chain Kane, he needs to come with me, so I'm like the dog in Lassie. But he saved my dad.
Well,
and every day when I came to work, somebody inevitably on the crew would say, "You know your lines?" And it's like, it got really old.
Yeah. He was Dirty Harry's partner, Clint Eastwood's partner in the Dirty Harry films. John Mitchum, great character actor, great creative artist. His big brother was Bob Mitchum. And his daughter, Cindy, is here to join us today.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're here. Now, you're working on a project to take your father's verse and record it and come out with a new production. And Cindy has Robert Duvall reading America Why I Love Her, and has so many wonderful people attached to this project.
Ernie Borgnine and A.C. Lyles, who told me I had to do it. And they took me aside and they said, "What are you going to be doing with your dad's things?" And I said, "Well, we're putting up a website." And they said, "That's not enough." And AC looked at me and said, "The world needs and deserves your father's poetry." And then Ernie said, "Don't be selfish and keep it in a drawer." And he said, "Have all your dad's friends pick their favorite poem and have them record it, and I'll be the first one," which he was. And there's several of you in this room that I, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a part of that project. We now have over 50 recordings, and unfortunately, many of them have passed away, including Ernie and Ann Rutherford and Jim Gammon. Ernie actually introduced me to Ben Mankiewicz and told him what I was doing, and Ben just flipped. He said, "Do you realize what you have for Americana history?" Yeah. So I do realize, and but that's why I don't want to do it.
No, haphazardly, you can't.
I was going to say something
really
else, but yes. It has
G-rated.
to.
We are G-rated
yes.
here.
So, but I want it to be up to the standard that it deserves to be.
I know your dad was an Emmy-winning writer and created a show that I always enjoyed called Black Saddle, with Peter Breck before Big Valley as attorney Clay Culhane.
And he did like 13 Zane Grey Theaters, Tombstone Territory.
Tell us about getting your part on Black Saddle.
Well, it was one of the few times that I didn't have to audition because I knew the boss. So that was nice. And there was a guy named David Lowell Rich that did a lot of the Black Saddles and later went on and did a ton of television. I worked with him several times. And that was the first time I worked with David. And it was the first time that I did something that got me a lot of work later is I cried on camera. Well, when I think about how long ago this all was, I want to cry anyhow. But yeah, for some reason, I was able to do that. They used to, with most kid actors, they would blow the menthol in your eyes and tear you up. So that was the first time I got to cry. It was a very nice little role, and it got me a lot of work later on. But Black Saddle was, my sister just told me recently that she's very into horses and stuff. And as a little girl, my dad gave her, I guess when the show ended, they had the white horse with a black saddle on it. And he gave it to her. And she never knew what it was from. She still has the horse. Somehow the black saddle got lost.
And yeah, they loved each other so much. When Ben died, yeah, I'd never seen my father so broken up. It really, really got him. Although he used to tease about Ben because Ben would exaggerate slightly or change circumstances to make it a good story. And my dad would go, "It did not happen that way."
Well, he put the record straight with his book, A Company of Heroes. What a fabulous book that is. It's almost as if he's telling you those stories, and you can hear his voice.
You can hear his voice in that book.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was such a good storyteller.
Mm-hmm. He really, and the retention, how did he remember all of
I
that,
know.
too?
And his sister, Cappy, is still alive. She's 93. Same way. She remembers everything.
With the book, was that a laborious process, or did he write it out in longhand? How did that?
I remember it was a real labor of love between and also discord between my mother and father, because Daddy would write it out on a yellow pad, and then she would enter it into the computer. She was good on that, and she would edit it along the way, you know. And then he'd read it, and say, "What the hell happened to the blah blah blah?" You know, and it didn't work there, you know.
Do you have any special thoughts about your dad that you want to share?
You know, I think my dad, who he was on the screen is who he was in private. You know, a very accessible, warm, a bit complicated. He was just one of the most wonderful fathers. I can't imagine, you know, he had so much love, and he extended that out. He extended it out to the kids in our neighborhood. I mean, the Carey house was just a madhouse of 4 kids and all of our friends. And I would say hospitality is the thing about my parents that really stands out.